Hello everyone, my name is Leo, and if you follow our channel you know that we have done several videos about latency. For instance, one video comparing 23 amp modelers, one specifically dedicated to the Fender Tone Master Pro, etc. This new video is fully focused on the new Kemper Player latency management. I already tell you that testing this device was really tricky. This time, for a little problem I have encountered and that I will tell you later on in the video. Let's start. First of all, if you want more info about latency and how I have measured it, you can check out my 23 amp modeling pedalboard latency comparison following the link in the card above. With this out of the way, let's go straight to the results. If we keep the signal chain empty, with no effects selected, but just the amp and the cab switched off, as they cannot be removed from the signal chain, we have 2.6 milliseconds of latency. Then, if we still keep the amp and the cab off, but we populate the 4 effect blocks, keeping them switched off, we have 2.7 milliseconds of latency, which is good. In fact, we have just a tiny increase, but basically the latency does not change whether we keep the effect blocks populated and off or totally empty. If we keep the effect off and we switch on the cab block, we reach 3 milliseconds. On the other hand, with the amp on and the cab off, we have 3.2 milliseconds of latency. And this result is maintained even if we keep both the amp and the cab on at the same time. Now, whatever effect you activate, just one, all 4, even selecting different effects, the latency just increases a tiny bit from the above mentioned 3.2 milliseconds. And this means that the effect blocks are managed very well. I mean, latency basically does not change if we keep the effect blocks empty or populated but off, and even when activated, the effects increase just a tiny bit the overall latency. Furthermore, the latency does not change even if we connect the player with the computer via USB or if we connect the app. I'm mentioning this aspect because I noticed that with the Kemper stage, the USB connection increases the latency a little bit. Now, the little problem I have encountered measuring the latency and that I mentioned at the beginning of this video is the following. Basically, if you have the player connected to your computer and you use the rig manager, for instance, to activate or deactivate the amp or cab block, you have to wait around 5 seconds before the latency stabilizes. I mean, when you change the amp or the cab, the latency increases by around 2 milliseconds, and you have to wait around 5 seconds before it returns to its initial value. I think because while the computer and the player communicate each with the other, the latency increases. I'm mentioning this because basically I was changing the setting and testing the latency, and the results were changing drastically, even with some totally strange and unexpected behaviors, like having more latency switching off the amp and cab than having both switched off. And this was basically derived by the fact that I had to wait 5 seconds after changing the signal chain and before testing the unit again. It took me a while to understand it and to then test everything properly, and I was literally going crazy trying to understand all the strange behaviors and test results I was obtaining. So at the end we can say that the latency is good, even if not at the level of the best units in the market that manage a latency below 1 milliseconds, like the Boss modelers or the Iridium or the NUX that have a latency of just a tiny bit above the 1 millisecond. The results are basically in line with the Kemper stage. Obviously here we don't have an effect loop, and you know that testing the Kemper stage with the loop activated, the latency were going at around 10 milliseconds. But here the effect loop is not available. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon with my other videos about this little unit. Stay tuned. Bye bye.